Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're going to cover unit conversion. Sometimes it's called dimensional analysis. That's kind of a really fancy way of saying it, but it's really just unit conversion. So to start things off, we're just going to look at a really quick, easy example. And I'm going to try to make this the easiest explanation that I possibly can. So what is unit conversion? What is this dimensional analysis? So let's say that I had $1 and my best friend had 100 cents. I could give him the $1 in exchange for the 100 pennies, and it would be the same thing. It would just look different. If you understand that, then you understand dimensional analysis. You're taking something that you have and you're changing it into something that looks different but means the same exact thing. The $1, it just looks different than 100 pennies, but it means the exact same thing. So that's just a really basic example. You could also be given things like, let's say they give you a length like 5 inches and they say, hey, how many centimeters is that? So again, the basic idea is you take something that you have and you change it into something else that looks different but means the same thing. That's key. But before we actually get into some examples, I want to talk about these things called base measurements. Now you see I've got a T, L, and an M. This is things that we can measure in nature. They're time, length, and mass. Now, the base unit for time, we measure these in seconds. This is the seconds. Length, we measure these in meters. And mass, the base unit for this one is the gram. We measure that in grams. So why am I telling you this? I want to make sure you understand this first. So time is in seconds, length meters, and mass is in grams. So basically, somebody just came up with, okay, how long is 1 second going to be? It could be that long, it could be that long, maybe it could be this long. The bottom line is they standardized it so that everybody would base the same thing off of the same unit. So if 1 second happens to be that long, then everybody's going to say, okay, that's 1 second. Now a meter, that's just a certain length. So it has to be a fixed length. So I'm pretty sure what they do is like they shoot some kind of light and they measure how long it takes to travel in a certain amount of time. And that length, they just call it a meter. The bottom line is though that it's a fixed length and everybody bases their descriptions off of that. So if a meter happened to be, I don't know, the length of my arm here, then everybody would be basing their measurements off of this length. It would just be a standardized length, and the same goes for mass, which is going to be measured in grams. It's just a arbitrary measurement that somebody came up with. So another thing you need to understand is how to reduce just annoyances. So like, let's say you had to deal with a lot of seconds or a lot of meters or a lot of grams. Let's say you were measuring the mass of the earth. The earth is really big, right? So this is the earth. It's huge, right? So let's say we know that it's 10 billion grams or something. I'm just making this up. If it's 10 billion grams, that's a lot to write. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 grams. That is a ton of grams. Well, instead of writing 10 billion grams, maybe I could just write 10,000 megagrams. So this mega, this is called a prefix. It just makes things easier. So I'm going to be teaching you everything in the SI unit, which stands for Standard International. And there's a bunch of prefixes, and I want you to go ahead and look at this table I've created for you right here. Go ahead and pause the video when you get a second and just memorize these. You have to understand these to understand dimensional analysis. So you've got this big M for mega. That means 1,000,000. Kilo is 1,000, hecto 100, and the list goes on. So it just makes it convenient when you're dealing with a lot of stuff. Like for the example of the earth, you were dealing with billions of grams. Well, instead of saying billions, I could just well, this is a million, but I could just say a smaller amount of m instead of having to just large numbers. Conversely, if I had a really small length or something, like a micrometer, let's say if a meter was this long and I had a micrometer, you know, it's easier to define a fraction of it, or if you had a lot of those fractions, as just micrometers instead of, you know, 1/1,000,000th of a meter. It's just easier to say. So go ahead and pause the video and we'll see you in a second. Okay, so hopefully you pause the video, you know this table, you understand the basic idea of what unit conversion is. You take something that you're given, you change it into something that looks different but means the same thing. You understand we have base units in nature like time, length, and mass. They've already designated units like seconds for time, meters for length, and grams for mass. And we've got these SI prefixes to help us write things whenever it's a pain in the butt to write them. So moving on, let's see. Let's go ahead and write some things that you need to memorize before we start. I promise that we're going to start some examples in just a second. So you need to memorize these. And this is just a few of the things you need to memorize. These are called conversion factors. Conversion factors. Conversion factors. And basically what they do is they allow us to convert things. So remember on this page we had the $1 and the same thing as 100 pennies? That's called a conversion factor. So if somebody said, hey, you know, I have $5, how many pennies is that? Well, I know that each dollar is 100 pennies, and if I had 5 of those, I'd have 5 of these 100s, therefore I'd have 500 pennies. I used the conversion factor that $1 is 100 pennies to understand that. So these are just some really common conversion factors, and they're very important to help you. So let's see, we've already done the $1 is 100 pennies. So here's kind of I love this one. 1 inch is the same thing as 2.54 centimeters. That's a really big one. Let's see, some of these are pretty common sense, like 1 day equals 24 hours. I think everybody knows that one. 1 year is 365 days. And I think that's all the ones I have for this video. So those are the conversion factors. Now let's look at some rules real quick. Rules of the game. Here's some rules. So this is basically how it works. So if you understand these two things, you will understand dimensional analysis solidly. So the first thing is 5 over 5 equals 1. The second thing is this. If you understand these two things, you're going to be a great unit converter. All right, so let's look at the first thing. I'll explain this in a second. So 5 over 5 equals 1. Why is that? Well, anything that you have in top that you also have on the bottom of a fraction is always going to cancel out like this to equal 1. So let me ask you this. What is 1/2 times 2/3? What is that? Well, that's pretty easy. Let's see, I've got a 2 on top here and a 2 on bottom there. So they cancel since I had a 2 on top, 2 on bottom. And now my answer is 1 over 3 since that's what I was left with. 1 over 3. So you see what I mean? Anything you have on top that you also have on bottom is always going to cancel out. You're going to use this knowledge to help you convert units. So that's what that means. Now this is kind of different. I kind of made this up. So what's the difference here? You've got a green box and a red box. They look different, but they mean the same thing. So you take something that you're given, you change it into something that looks different, but means the same thing. They're both boxes, just like the $1 and 100 pennies. If you understand these two things, life will be easy. So let's go ahead and do an example after showing you all that stuff. So first example here. Let's say we need to change 3 minutes into seconds. So the question is, how many seconds are in 3 minutes? So the first thing you always want to do, if this is something like a homework problem or a science, advanced science, even an intense math problem, you always write what you're given. Okay, so this is what I was given. I was given 3 minutes and they asked me to change it into seconds. So let's go ahead and write, what was I given? I was given the 3 minutes. I wrote that down. That's step 1. Step 2 is you always write your multiplication symbol in a horizontal line every time. Now we need to utilize the first thing that we saw here, the first rule, where anything you have on top that you also have on bottom is always going to cancel. You need to utilize that in this step. So the goal is to get to seconds. So how do I get seconds? Well, I have to get rid of the minutes since I don't want minutes. Well, how am I going to do that? I got to cancel them out. Well, how do I cancel out minutes? I have to have them also on bottom. So right now, anything you have and it's automatically divided by 1, since anything divided by 1 is the same thing, right? So the minutes are already on top. So if I put minutes down here, minutes would cancel with minutes because I had a minute on top and a minute on bottom. But before I can do that, I have to introduce this thing. It's called a conversion factor. And those are the things we looked at on the other slide. So what is a conversion factor? So it's something that is equivalent. It's an equivalent statement. So let's see, what do you know about minutes? Well, I know that in 1 minute, there's going to be 60 seconds, right? So the top equals the bottom, and that's what makes a conversion factor a conversion factor. So remember, this is an equivalent statement. It's a conversion factor. So now I've got minutes on top, minutes on bottom, they go away. And I'm left with seconds on top and a 1 on bottom. So my result when I type this in my calculator is going to give me the seconds. And that's what I want, right? So let's type this in our calculator. So you always start with multiplying the top things together and then dividing the bottom things. But since the bottom things are just ones, I don't have to worry about them. So I just type in 60 times 3. This was an easy one. So in my calculator, I type 60 times 3. And let's see, I've got my calculator right here. Here it is. Oh no, okay, I thought it had no, well, I think it's out of batteries, sorry. I have another one here. This is a more advanced one, but, so 60, sorry, you can't see that. 60 times 3, the answer is 180. Sorry if you can't see that. That's 180 seconds. And that is all there is to it, guys, really. You do the same thing for any type of problem. So let's go to a more advanced problem. Let's say we were given 1 year and they want, let's say, milliminutes. Milliminutes. So what does this mean? So that is a prefix, right? Milli. And if we remember from our table, milli, this means 1 out of 1,000, right? So how many thousandths of a minute are in a year? Remember the table. 1 out of 1,000. It could have been written with the lowercase m. So what do? First step is you always write what we're given. We're given 1 year. All right. And you're gonna write your multiplication symbol and your horizontal line. I may run out of room here. Okay, so how do we get rid of years and get these milliminutes? How are we gonna do that? So usually a good rule of thumb is to try to get to minutes first and then worry about the milliminutes. So we wrote down what we were given. We wrote a multiplication symbol in the horizontal line. To get rid of something, you have to have something in top and bottom to get rid of it. So I know for sure I want to get rid of years, right? So anything divided by 1 is automatically itself. So I already know that years are on top. So I know for sure I'm gonna have to put years on bottom. I'm gonna have to make a conversion factor to get rid of it. So last time we went straight from minutes to seconds and we got the seconds, right? But I don't think we can do that this time. Can we go straight from years to milliseconds? That's kind of really hard to do. I don't know that conversion factor off the top of my head, but what do I know about years? Well, I know 1 year, I can convert that pretty easily into days. I'm just gonna write abbreviation. That's 365 days for every year. So there are 365 days in 1 year. So that's an equivalent statement. It's my conversion factor. So I know that the year is gonna cancel with year, top and bottom canceling because I had a year up here and a year down there. So if I just type this in my calculator, I would do 365 times 1, and that would be how many days are in a year. But I don't want days, I want milliminutes. So you have to keep on going. So we have to introduce enough conversion factors to get us to what we want. So right now we have a day on top. We need to get rid of it, right? So how do you get rid of something that's on top? You got to put it on bottom too. So let's put our days down here. So what are we going to go to? That's a good question. What should we go to? What conversion factor do we know? Well, I do know hours. That's a pretty easy one. 1 day is the same thing as 24 hours, right? That's easy. So the day at the top cancels with day on the bottom. If I type this in my calculator, I'm going to get hours, but I don't want hours. I got to keep on going. So let's do another conversion factor. So I have hours on top. I need to get rid of them. So I'm going to put hours on bottom right here because I'm going to do top and bottom. I'm setting myself up top and bottom canceling like that. But I need to have a conversion factor again right here. So what do I know about hours? How are they related to the minutes? Let's not worry about the milli part. Let's just worry about the minutes. So how are hours related to minutes? Do I know that conversion factor? I think I do. Let's see, minutes. I'm pretty sure that 1 hour is the same thing as 60 minutes. Everything in the brackets is a conversion factor and everything on top and bottom has to be equivalent. So 1 hour is the same thing as 60 minutes. So if I typed it in my calculator, I would get minutes, but I don't need minutes. I need milliminutes. So got to do one more conversion factor. Sorry, I ran out of room. So what's going to be my last conversion factor here? So right now I've got minutes on top and I need to get milliminutes. So I need to cancel these minutes. So I got to put them in bottom somehow. So let's put them in bottom right there. So if we convert these into, let's see, we want milliminutes, right? I'm just going to write MM for abbreviation for milliminutes. So do I know this conversion factor? This is kind of tricky. So what do I know about this? So I know that 1 minute is the same thing as 1,000 milliminutes. Or why is that? Remember that table? This means milli means 1,000ths. So if you think of milliminutes, it's 1,000th of a minute. So how many milliminutes are in 1 minute? Well, if you think of a minute, you can think of time as length. If 1 minute was this long and I broke it up into 1,000 pieces, that'd be a lot of little bitty milliminutes, right? So I don't have to memorize this conversion factor. I just know that 1 minute is long and I have to have a lot of little bitty milliminutes to make up that 1 minute. So there's 1,000 of those suckers in 1 minute. That's how I knew that conversion factor. You know, you got to mentally break it up. Time and length are really similar. I do that a lot. So now, if we look, what did we do here? We converted years to days, days to hours, hours to minute, and then see we've got a minute on top, and I had a minute on bottom, so they canceled. And I'm going to be left with millimeters, and that is what I want. So I can go ahead and type this all on my calculator. So what are you going to do? You type 1 times 365 times 24 times 60 times 1,000. So that's 1 times 365 times 24 times 60 times 1,000. And if I do that, I get 1 times 365 times 24 times 60 times 1,000. I'm going to get a very large number. 5, 2, 5, 6, 525,600,000 milliminutes. That's a lot of milliminutes. I don't know why someone would want to know that, but so that's a basic breakdown. I hope you guys learned something. If you'd like me to continue this with more advanced unit conversions, feel free to post a comment or a video response. Hope you guys have a great day.